So I'm Christian Lanng. I'm wearing a cap because I'm trying to make procurement great again. Make something great. I'm the CEO and founder of a software company called Tradeshift. We're around 7 years old. We work making cloud software and trying to build solutions. And we don't talk about it as procurement software. We actually talk about creating solutions for companies to buy and sell to each other and everything around it. One of the things I want to talk to you about today, and I think last time, if anybody were here last year, I was a little bit like very dramatic about what's happening and is procurement going extinct and all of that. This year, I'm actually quite a bit more positive, right? So first off, I think we generally tend to think right now, if we just open the media, that the world is going to hell, right? Like, I mean, that's sort of the image we get, politics, Middle East, all of these things. But it's hard to forget that literally the world have never been better than it is right now. We have less disease than we have had the last 100 years, longer life expectancy, more education, better healthcare. Like, everything is literally better. But what's something that's truly fascinating about where we are right now, and I think if we look at technology and how it impacts our world, and we just had a very nice little lunch about some of these things, but what can be hard to sometimes get your head around is this is happening at exponential rates. And exponential, we tend to think means a smaller phone or a faster laptop, but actually what's so interesting is it's all powered by Moore's law, right? And Moore's law predicts that every 18 months, this is something procurement people should like, you can get twice the computing power for the same cost as you could 18 months ago, or said in other words, roughly half the cost every 18 months. There's actually another law, which is Rupert's law, which is that every 18 months there will also be a prediction of the death of Moore's law. And so far, none of those predictions has held. It's just powering true, because there's this wonderful thing about Moore's law is the better we get computers, the better chips we can also make. So whenever we think we can't see the next generation of computer chips, because how can we move any possibly further? They're now like at 11 nanometers, which is like an 8,000th of a hair apart. So it's pretty hard. But then we get faster computers who can build the next generation of computers for us. So this is powering exponential growth in our society, and we think about as software as hardware every day. But what we, I think, don't think about is right now it's reconfiguring everything in the physical and economical world around us. And that's the new thing. And that's what I want you to think a lot about today in procurement, because your world is completely going to be turned upside down over the next 3 years by what's happening here, right? So first off, global internet devices. We are right there. So smartphones, 3 times as many as PCs now. If you try to do business with a supplier in Asia, 97% of them have smartphones that has better internet and are faster than the smartphones suppliers on average have in the West. 60% of them have a PC. So actually, just to start with, all of your procurement systems, all of your supplier portals, all of your interaction in Asia should be mobile first. Put your hand up if it is. Okay, no. Well, Internet of Things. Why do Internet of Things matter for procurement? So you know, Internet of Things is this idea that everything is going to be internet connected. This chair, light bulbs, etc. Talked with some executives from IKEA. They said in 3 years, IKEA is not going to sell any light bulbs that don't have Wi-Fi. Why? Because the light bulb can tell how long it has left. It can do much smarter power management. It can report back to the system as a whole. So why is this so relevant for procurement? Well, we work with one facility management company right now who's looking at how they can completely do what they call Internet of Things-driven procurement. Instead of having people to figure out how much toilet paper, soap, etc. they need to order for facilities, that's just one example, they put a sensor on the door. And they count how many people go in and out of the bathroom. And the bathroom issue automatically an order for new toilet paper when it hits a certain count. So the bathroom is ordering itself. Why involve a person in that, right? So Internet of Things is exploding. If you saw before here, right, we talk about 2.5 billion internet connected devices right about now. If you look at Internet of Things, you're talking about 30 billion internet connected devices in 5 years from now. Or roughly 12 times the amount of internet devices we have today. Funding into AI, so that's growing at an exponential rate. Right now, the best AI in the world just passed an intelligence test for a 6-year-old at Stanford. So I think that should probably put us on par with some procurement functions, not all of them. No. The thing is, of course, what we call general AI is still very far away, the Terminator kind that I think everybody is scared of. But what's called small AI, solving a specific task. I also said it this morning, we now have cars from Google that's driving 3 million miles on the roads of California. There is no task that goes on in procurement that's more complex than driving a car. Just think about that for a second. Everything that fits within that complexity window can now be automated by AI that's in production. That AI has fallen in cost from around $50,000 per car, which was essentially a supercomputer in a car, to around $500 per car in the same time period. Which means by the time it starts hitting production for other areas, we should be around $50 per computer that can do the task of a human being in procurement. So see if you can make that business case work. Industrial robots. We have exponential growth of industrial robots in the world. That is incredibly important for everything that's going on when we buy stuff. Why? First off, because small batch production is falling rapidly in cost. We're now in a situation where the largest shoe companies, these are from Adidas, they can make around 100 pair of sneakers at the same cost per unit as they can make 100,000 sneakers. So why order 100,000 sneakers to get scale of cost? There's probably also a few logistics companies in the room that's pretty interested in what that will mean for them. That means we can do on-site, on-demand production near the centers where we need to sell it. On the fly, customized for the individual user. We're working with shoe companies, we're working with a few other furniture companies and others that said the future market for anything we sell is a market of one. And we want our procurement function, we want our supply chain, we want everything around it to reflect this. Industrial robots, and especially what we call learning robots, is the future of that. So learning robots is the next generation of industrial robots. And what you do is, you take the robot by the hand, you show the moves you want it to make, and it knows how to make it. Any worker on the factory floor can do that. You don't need an army of consultants to set them up. Average cost of one of those robots, $50,000, or around 10 times less than a full-scale industrial robot today, and falling rapidly. Cryptocurrency. Wow, this is some nerdy stuff. Why are we talking about that? This is the development in price of Ethereum. Ethereum is not the cryptocurrency you normally always hear about, which is Bitcoin. Ethereum is interesting because it's a platform. Anybody can write apps for Ethereum. Can anybody guess what the biggest use case of apps written for Ethereum is? Contracts. The future of contract management is blockchain. And all of the contract software you just bought have no idea what that is. Not even remotely. So when we have that bathroom that's ordering its own toilet paper and soap, wouldn't it be nice if it actually had like a built-in escrow mechanism that would just distribute the cost as quality of service were hit and stuff was delivered? That's the kind of contracts you can build per blockchain, where you can say, automatically distribute this amount of money based on this set of performance criteria picked up from these sensors every day, every week, if you want to do as micropayments or every month, whatever your payment terms are. So you can start building contracts that are completely automated, connected into sensors that know how you pay out stuff at like a micro rate. Projects on Kickstarter. We talk a lot about sourcing, don't we? The reality is that most projects on Kickstarter can come to market end-to-end, faster developed than most large companies can today. And a lot of these guys, they're using what I talked about before, the small batch production to do it cheaper, smaller batches. And they're skipping completely a lot of companies that sit in between these two steps. Selling it straight to the consumer, going back and getting financing, and then building it straight from the shelf. So any kind of two designers who have a great idea for a speaker or a new device, they can get this to market. How many procurement departments in here have experimented with Kickstarter? How many think you will be using Kickstarter in the future? Kickstarter is actually already setting up their first business-to-business area to do enterprise projects for enterprise customers. It's a great way to both source and market a project in one go. It's a great way to get attention. But it also requires to think very differently about stakeholder groups, right? I bet you a lot of innovation and sort of experimentation in the future in procurement will come from projects like this. Installation of renewable energy is now growing at renewable rates. One of the really great things I thought about the whole recent discussion, I mean, it was not great that the US dropped out of the Paris Agreement, but what was interesting was the second they dropped out, 100 American companies said, well, we are still in, right? In the US, I live in the US, where climate has been seen as a tax on companies for the last 20 years. Suddenly there, everybody is so eager to be in the climate agreement. Why? Because it's a trade agreement. It's actually the future of so many different markets that if you want to be part of it, you much rather want to be part of it than you want to be outside, because it'll regulate the price of carbon, regulate the price of energy created, it'll give you access to new frameworks for trade across Europe and China. So, and underlying all of this, there's the fact that solar right now is growing with the scale of Moore's Law. India and China just scrapped all of their plans for coal projects. Together, more than 250 coal plants just canceled. Imagine being in the coal plant building industry and getting that news. Why? Because solar is already far below the cost of coal and falling much faster. The other problems we need to solve around storage, all of these things. I come from Denmark, where in the winter we produce 150% of the grid energy we need. So we actually have a reverse problem. We need to send it out in the grid to not burn our own grid. So we pay to get rid of energy. It's the reverse problem. So what does that mean? That means a lot for logistics, right? It means a lot for consumers. It means a lot for almost any industry you can think of. I don't know any major car manufacturer in the world that's not going to switch to an electrical car company within the next 10 years. And if they tell you they're not, they're lying. Even the largest American ones are very, very far into these plants. So if you supply anything to them, if you work with them, if any part of your supply chain today is dependent on fossil fuels, what's your strategy for this? This is sort of just the technology piece, which I talk a lot about, but actually the context around it is changing also, right? Who here knows about One Belt, One Road? Yeah, so One Belt, One Road is a project to link Chongqing in China with Frankfurt with high-speed rail, which will take the speed of bringing one container from China down to 7 days from, is it 21 days, I think, today at sea. They're literally moving China physically and putting it next to Europe. So that's going to change the world's trade picture completely radically. It's the largest infrastructure project in the world today. And most companies we talk to, they're not aligned. We do a lot of business in China. I can tell you all of the Chinese suppliers, they're deep, deep into this, right? So what are your capabilities right now in China? How can you engage with supply chain in China? How can you work with suppliers in China? All of those things. You might start to think about it. And also, don't think that suppliers in China are like these cheap copycat vendors. China has the largest installation of industrial robots in the world today. And they are manufacturing stuff within tolerances that even German manufacturers can do. So from a quality perspective, from a cost perspective, and from an automation perspective, they're far ahead of the rest of the world. What's the impact of Brexit on global commerce? We of course seen a lot of currency movements. We also see supply chains being reconfigured. I was here last year, we talked about this, and we're already working with the first customers around some of the strategies that's been changed a little bit since then. I think another thing to consider there is that because of all the stuff that's going on between Europe and US also, Europe is pulled even further together. So as Brexit is happening, Europe is also getting tighter. You'll see a lot more integration now on economy, military. They're fixing a lot of the issues with the euro. So the whole Trump kickoff discussion has actually accelerated Europe in fixing some of the internal structural problems. And for them right now, actually, compared to a trade war with Trump, UK is a fairly minor thing. And that will probably also impact the Brexit negotiations quite a bit from a European focus and perspective. TPP, gone. That means China took all of that space. So TPP was designed to be the trade agreement that essentially put a ring around China from a trade perspective. When Trump, he tore that up, China, they launched the regional trade agreement instead with all of those countries. So if you do any business in the region, you should probably know what that means from a perspective of how your supply chains and spend is configured, right? Paris, we just talked about, new trade deals. So this is really sort of leading into, right, we have a perfect storm of technology and political change in the world right now. And that's exciting because that essentially means that you have all been converted to founders of a startup. And the startup is, what is procurement going to mean in 2018? Because it's going to look nothing like what you know. And the really cool thing about startups is you're building unknown things. When we started Tradeshift, we had no idea what this would look like. We were going into territory that nobody knew about. So we had to pioneer. We really had to think about what will the world look like in this space. And that's the thing as a startup founder. That's what you need to figure out. What is your new business? So you're all startup founders now, and I think that's super exciting for most businesses to go to this change. And of course, it'll be disruptive. For some, it'll be exciting. For some, it'll be a lot of fear, whatever. But it's still going to create change no matter what. And if we think about some of the things that I think will be in key sort of focus, where the last 10 years, procurement was about what? Cost saving, transparency, and mass scale, right? Now it's about innovation, it's about value creation, and it's about everywhere for everyone. If you don't run fast enough in enabling your businesses and your suppliers on the processes they want, they'll just go around you. It's so easy. I built my first cloud computing platform for the Danish government on my travel credit card. Because IT, they kept saying I couldn't get the server I wanted. By the time that I could finally get the server I wanted, I think my credit card bill was like $100,000 a month. So it made sense. But we could build a whole platform for the Danish government on a travel credit card because IT, they didn't want to give it. And by the way, that system saved the Danish government $40 million a year, right? So it was well worth it. We're moving from controlling costs to creative commerce, enabling value creation and innovation. That's what you got to do. The reality is that the effort, the time, and the resources that goes into saving another 1% on one category is better spent figuring out how you can increase the margins of that category with 5% or 10%. And for almost all of your categories, the answer is the same. More data from your suppliers, more insights can actually allow you to build better products, build value-added products. I was working with a logistics company, and you know logistics is fiercely competitive on rates, what they pay internally. But we enable them to actually pass through the whole supply chain, collect climate data, healthcare data, all of these things that they could pass on to their customer and sell as a value-added product that has far bigger margins than their transport product. So really think about, are you spending your time right? Because what I also find super interesting is it's very often procurement who know where these opportunities are. So I think in the future, procurement needs to be a platform for what I call creative commerce. Not finding the cheapest suppliers, but find the suppliers that will make the biggest strategic difference for your business. And very often they now look like a 2 or 3 guy company, either somewhere in China, somewhere in US or somewhere else, that normally would have 0 chance of passing through your procurement process, but can make complete future for your company, right? So not only are you founders of a startup, you're probably also a little bit like VCs, venture capitalists, that you need to go out and find these things that can make a game changer for your business and invest in a relationship with them. Help them get in, not be the bottleneck. Like a lot of the innovation that's just going on around here in Oxford, what chance would one of those small teams have doing business with most of your companies? That's where you need to think, can we have a VC arm that can actually, I don't talk about investing money, but that can invest in those relationships so we can extract the value from them. Because if you don't do, more agile companies, more agile startups will. And your competitors are no longer who you thought it was. If you're a car company, let's say you're BMW, your competitor is not GM. Your competitor is Apple and Tesla, right? If you're a logistics company, your competitor is no longer DHL and UPS. It's Amazon. And that's a whole lot more scary than the old guys. Because they don't stop at anything when it comes to innovation, right? So what about Tradeshift? I talk a lot about change and all of these things. What do we actually do? And I know I've been here like 3 times. I haven't talked a lot about what we do. So we talk about Tradeshift as a business commerce platform. We are a platform where any process that happens between the buyer and the seller, you can do it on our platform. We can help you to do it better. for those who care, for us to say we are a strong performer, whatever that means, I think what's really important is that we have helped a lot of our customers realize their goals. And we always try to do that in a strategic way to try to figure out what is the strategic value that really matters to your business. Not just how can we help your procurement department save. I mean, we get some RFPs in that says, help us save 5% on our invoicing. And we typically pass on those. Because we much rather help you save $100 million on something else if we can get to talk about what your real goals. We have software for procure to pay, supply engagement, seller solutions, financial solutions, end-to-end, partners for that, and even small business solutions. But the reality is it's all the same thing. It's a platform. It's a network that can be configured to connect any kind of seller, buyer, supplier, and any kind of business process on top of it. The only thing that I think we've really done differently than the competitors is we've been able to connect most of the suppliers for most of the companies we do business with. This is a case from a big North American shoe company who's fairly well known, that had been running 4 years and trying to connect their supply chain. And they connected the 350 most strategic suppliers. We took that project over, and in 12 months we connected 5,000 suppliers. In 24 months we connected 97% of their global supply chain, 99% of their spend. And that actually meant that the average lack of information in procurement went from being 1 to 2 months to 3 minutes. And that's a pretty big competitive advantage. And we don't talk about the cost savings here, right? We talk about understanding in detail every single thing that moves and happens in your supply chain every 3 minutes, because everything is digital. So that's what we do really more than anything. Some of our customers, we are sort of a little bit under the radar. I think a lot of companies are very well known out there. We are very happy to work with most of the major companies in the world and try to drive some value for them. So that's what we do. So enough talk, let's talk a little bit about some real innovation, right? Because I do a lot of smack talk about what's happening in this industry and what's not happening. So I want to give you 3 examples of some real innovation that we've been driving in different areas. So the first one is collaborative procurement. So in this room here, right, how many of you think rogue spend or maverick spend is bad for your company? Put up your hands if you think this. Okay. How many think it's awesome? Okay. You know what the people who do rogue spend and maverick spend they are? They are rebels with a cause. They are people who care enough about getting something done that they're willing to break the rules of your company to deliver business value. And the only reason they're a rebel is because you're in the way. I mean, again, the example is me building a cloud computing system for the Danish government that saved $40 million a year, cost $100,000 a month, because I couldn't get a server through the regular procurement process. I mean, I didn't get fired exactly. If it were up to the procurement director, I would probably been fired. There was a very heated discussion around that. But the point is, it's not about people breaking the process. You need to switch your mindset to be customer driven. These people are your customers, and you're giving them bad solutions. It's like, I mean, could you imagine Apple having that kind of approach to building the hardware? It would be like, yeah, it can't call or have a browser, but we don't think you need that. So just take this, right? What you would end up with would probably be like a early Nokia or BlackBerry or something, right? So the process needs to fit the needs of the people, right? And what's really tragic here, right? What is it procurement wants? And I go to a lot of these procurement conferences, I see all of these presentations from all of these CPOs, right? And you all want the same things, I think, more or less, which is spend transparency, control reduction of cost, and love. Procurement people really ultimately just want to be loved. It's like, why are we so misunderstood? Why don't we get attention at the C-level? Why won't the board listen to us? All of these things. Why are we the most misunderstood field of all of the C titles in the company, right? And here's what users they want. They want ease of use, they want speed, and they want respect. See the problem? So the good news is we can actually marry love and respect, right? If you give them what they want, they feel respected and they love you, right? So how do we solve that problem without maybe necessarily just forcing bad software down the throat of people, right? And solve some of the other problems. So one of the things we did was we created something called Tradeshift Go. We called it internally a tool for the rogue buyer. We thought, how can we enable the people who do Mavic and rogue spend to do it faster, better, more efficient, and feel empowered in the process? We call it Tradeshift Go. It's pretty simple. It's a small mobile application or desktop application that sits in your browser. If you're searching for something, let's say on Amazon or Google, it'll pop up and say, hey, do you want to buy this? And say, sure. You can then click and request a credit card, and you get a one-time credit card for that purchase. So you're not using your corporate card, you're not using your personal credit card, you're using a one-time credit card that issues just for that purchase. We can also set in an approval step, but we actually don't recommend it. We instead just say, put a spend limit. Don't let people do it above a certain amount. So what does that do? It enables users to buy quickly using virtual cards so they don't have friction. It can happen very, very fast. It even works on the phone. But it also gives the procurement department full insight, real time, into all of the spend that's happening. And now they can do something that's really cool. They can go to the department and say, hey, we noticed you're using virtual cards to buy this a lot. Can we help you set up an agreement with that? So instead of trying to do an upfront control process where you can't get everybody to participate, we put an audit process in behind after the fact. And the reality is that instead of having that 30% rogue spend you have every year that you've been trying to remove the last 20 years, you now have all of your users, you have insight, you have spent data, just because you were willing to give up on one principle, that you needed to have upfront controls. And the reality, by the way, is that most approval levels don't work. We have a lot of research on that. The more levels of approval you have, the less they work. It's very, we actually, at the North American Shoe Company, we removed almost all levels of approval. We just put in pick your own approver. And fraud fell. Didn't go up, all the way around. And now we get to the point where we can actually just randomize. So we say only 5% of transactions needs to be approved, but we'll randomize which ones, so you never know if you'll need to or not. And you will never know who the approver is. Science. We can use control groups to actually make sure that doesn't get through, and we can make life easier for most users. And if we can do that, what do we get? We show the users respect that their time is valuable, and we give them tools that they can use to do their job faster and more efficient. And what do you get? You get love. So everybody wins. You also get reduction in spend and control and transparency because you actually know what's happening. A platform, not a tool. So procurement, treasury, account payable, direct materials, product information, analytics, time management, supply information, resource planning, temp, labor, travel. What do all of these have in common? That you have 20 different tools to solve them. No, it's the same suppliers. It's also the same end users inside your organization, and funnily enough, it's also the same data. We used to have one common platform. All companies had it. It was amazing. Everything worked. It was seamless. That platform was paper. Then we started digitizing, and all hell broke loose. Because we started digitizing tool by tool. So it's like in US, we have these wonderful kitchen appliances that can do only one thing, right? Like an egg and muffin toaster, instead of having a toaster. And what you end up with in the supply chain is 21 purpose tools. Here's my tool for corporate social responsibility. Here's my tool for AP. Here's my tool for buying. Here's my tool for dynamic discounting. Here's my tool for resource management, all of these things. W-9s, tax, corruption, keep going, right? And it's really time to tear down the silos. And the only function, let's talk a little bit about this morning, that can truly do that is procurement. When you are picking a procurement system, you gotta stop thinking about your own needs. They are the least important needs of the whole process of picking a procurement system. The first set of needs you need to think about is, what do the suppliers want? Because they are your users. No suppliers on the platform, no data in your system, you just wasted a fortune. The second thing you need to think about is, what are all the other processes around me that could have benefit from being connected to the same suppliers? That's your second set of users. And once you have those two, you can start thinking about, and what do we need? Because guess what? If you can tell the suppliers, here's one login, and you can access all of the services of our company. We do it often when we get a new customer. We start by doing a survey. We start asking the suppliers, so tell me, how many tools do you have to do business with Business X? The average is around 12. Worst case is 34. Fax, PDF, logins, home-built systems, different processes, spreadsheets that's mailed in. You're literally asking your suppliers to use, on average, 12 different processes and systems to do business with you, typically with different passwords, different logins, different access ways. So it's time to tear down the silos, right? And one of the things we realized with Tradeshift is, what if we built your supply chain platform like a smartphone? Connect once and then activate new processes like apps. We have a core set of applications around procure to pay, risk management, all of these things. But we have more than 100 third-party apps now. Moody's just built a tool for credit rating. Citi have an app for supply chain finance. In fact, we have all of the major banks on the platform now. Citi, Santander, HSBC, Amex, C2FO, who's also here today. So you don't need to go and onboard those separately. We rolled it out for Kuhn and Nagel. They had 7,000 suppliers on the platform, and they decided they wanted to do supply chain finance. They clicked and activated the supply chain finance app from Citibank to their supply chain, and 24 hours later, all of the suppliers had access to supply chain finance. Just think about what the change management process would look like inside your organization if you had to roll out a global supply chain finance project after you just did P2P. Or corporate social responsibility, or tax, or risk, or on and on and on. So the reality is, once you've connected your whole supply chain once, TCO goes to 0 for the next process. Change management goes to 0 for the next process if you use a platform. So that's the second big innovation we tried to do, which was really to think about how you can be agile around your processes, how you can build your own stuff, and we literally have an app store just like on an iPhone. You can go in and activate apps. So the last thing, which we talked about a lot about, artificial intelligence for procurement. So do you ever get a purchase request for something and you really don't know what it's about or why? Or some approver in your organization do? And you would love to just know, let's say in my organization, Jane, she wants an iPhone. And there's a purchase request for an iPhone. And I just want to know something really simple. Did Jane order an iPhone before recently? How many clicks is it in your reporting in data warehouse to figure out if Jane ordered an iPhone recently? If you say less than 3, you're lying. It's impossible to figure out. So these tools and systems, especially around analytics and AI, data warehousing, are really good at finding aggregates, trends, big numbers. But for the people who make the everyday decisions, they're not very helpful tools. Especially if you want to figure out if you should approve something or not. So one of the things we just released Ada. Ada is not, she's actually an AI layer on our whole platform. Think about it as Siri for procurement. She has 3 real big key jobs. One is automate all interactions with our data warehouse analytics layer. But also, next, automating workflow steps. So she's listening in on the workflow, and when she has recorded enough transactions, she'll helpfully ask you if she should just do that step for you in the future. And we can give you the exact efficiency rates, fall-off rates, all of that stuff. And then she can suggest solutions and applications for end users. That's the starting point. We expect to do much more with her. And that's the very last thing. So actually just, because that's another pet peeve of mine. We talk so much about software in this industry, end users and all of these things, but we never really show it. And I actually think it is suspicious to be a software company and talk about software and not want to show your software. It's a little bit like Apple selling iPhones and not want to show them to you. It's like, let me describe the iPhone to you. True, it's this big, it's this wide, but they forgot to tell you that it was pink. So Ada sits inside our collaboration layer. It's only 1 minute, so I'll be very quick. And anybody who interacts with our collaboration layer, she can actually just ask her questions or work with her. So in this case, I'm just saying a help question. Can I get notifications in Tradeshift? Sure. And she just pulls it up from the help knowledge base. Then we go on and do something else. How much did I spend yesterday? Normal user question. How many clicks in your data warehouse to know this? Not less than 3, right? But Ada, she's connected with all of our analytics, so she can just pull it up for you. Tell you exactly what you spent. What you spent for the week, what you spent last week, this month, and then we go on and on. She can also say, hey, can I order on behalf of? She highlights the area of the application where you order on behalf of. Have you gotten any of these questions in your shared service center? Or people who want to know how to use the software, right? So you can see how that works, and I can now order on behalf of. So did Jane order ink today? Because I asked her to do that. Yeah, she actually did. Here's the purchase request. But wait a second. Isn't it missing a color? So now I'm asking Jane. So let's just pull Jane into the conversation, right? And by the way, there's a lot of talk about collaboration in this industry. But there's not a lot of real support for it in the software. Here in this channel here, we can also pull in suppliers. Start collaborating. I mean, this is true collaboration. So we pull in Jane and we say, hey, didn't you miss Magenta? And sure. So we ask Ada to find the last ordered Magenta for this type of printer. Pulls it up. And now I can add it to my purchase order. And I can check out. I think we're done. Yeah. So what I wanted to show you was some real world use cases for actual AI in procurement software and how it's already there and how this is fully in production in Tradeshift. We came out with it last quarter and we're going to be adding a lot to it. So all of the stuff I just showed you, by the way, is stuff that we've been pushing within the last 12 months. And I talked to some of you over lunch about how innovation now happens so much faster on the cloud side than on-premise. Because we can push innovation to all of our users continuously all the time. So anyways, that was everything. I hope it was inspiring and you got some ideas. And if you're interested in any of the cool stuff I've shown, I mean, Ian is here, I'm here. We're happy to talk about it.